England, 1809. Lady Kathleen Maitland stood by the refreshment table, her gloved fingers absently tracing the embroidered edge of the tablecloth. The Countess of Wiltshire's spring balls swirled around her, a kaleidoscope of silk gowns, polished boots, and glittering jewels beneath the warm glow of hundreds of candles. She had positioned herself strategically, as she always did at these affairs, visible enough to satisfy propriety, yet tucked away where her presence would not invite unwanted attention, or, worse still, pity. At 23, Kathleen had long since accepted her place in society. As the eldest daughter of the respected Earl of Sherborne, she had been presented at court 5 seasons ago, a memory that still brought a flush of embarrassment to her cheeks. How hopeful she had been then, how painfully naive. 5 seasons had come and gone, and here she remained, unmarried, unnoticed, and increasingly resigned to her fate. "Kathleen," came her mother's voice from behind, causing her to straighten her posture instinctively. "Do try to look less forlorn, dear. It does nothing for your complexion." The Countess of Sherborne was a handsome woman of 45, whose beauty had been passed generously to her younger daughters, but it seemed had skipped Kathleen entirely. Not that Kathleen was plain. She had fine eyes, a pleasing figure, and chestnut hair that gleamed with hints of auburn in the sunlight, but she lacked the vivacity, the sparkling charm that made her sisters so irresistible to the gentlemen of the ton. "Yes, mother," Kathleen replied dutifully, forcing her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. "Your sisters are causing quite a stir," her mother continued, gesturing toward the dance floor where Caroline and Amelia were indeed the centers of attention. At 19, Caroline was a celebrated beauty with golden curls and a figure that had launched a dozen marriage proposals, all of which she had declined with practiced sweetness. Amelia, barely 18, was equally stunning with her delicate features and melodious laugh that carried across the room. "I'm pleased for them," Kathleen said, and she meant it. Despite everything, she loved her sisters dearly, even when their success in society cast her own failures into such stark relief. "Lord Harrington has been asking about Caroline all evening," her mother whispered, her eyes gleaming with ambition, "and Viscount Bennet has danced with Amelia twice already." "Your father is most pleased." "That's wonderful," Kathleen murmured, her eyes drifting back to the refreshment table. Perhaps another slice of cake would provide some comfort. She reached for the silver serving knife. "Oh, Kathleen," Caroline said, suddenly appearing at her side, slightly breathless from dancing. "Not another piece, surely. Remember what I told you about your figure." Kathleen's hand froze mid-air, then slowly withdrew. Caroline meant well, she always did, but her thoughtless comment stung nonetheless. "Caroline," their mother admonished, though without much conviction, "be kind to your sister." Caroline shrugged, her attention already captured by a group of admirers waiting nearby. "I'm merely thinking of her best interests. Oh, look, Lord Harrington is beckoning. I must go." And with a swish of her pale blue gown, she was gone. Kathleen released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I believe I shall step out for some air, Mother. The room is rather warm." Before her mother could object, Kathleen slipped away, navigating the crowded ballroom with practiced invisibility. Few heads turned as she passed. No eager suitors stepped forward to claim her hand for the next dance. She had become adept at this particular form of social ghosting, present yet unseen, acknowledged yet forgotten. The terrace was mercifully empty. Kathleen inhaled deeply, letting the cool spring air fill her lungs. London's night sky was obscured by clouds, but a few persistent stars peeked through, distant and cold. "Like me," she thought wryly, then chastised herself for the self-pity. "Are you unwell, Lady Kathleen?" The deep voice startled her, and she turned quickly to find Lord Edward Hathaway, a long-time family friend, regarding her with concern. At 30, Lord Hathaway was a confirmed bachelor with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had always put Kathleen at ease. "Lord Hathaway, no, I am quite well, thank you. Merely seeking a moment's respite." He nodded, understanding in his gaze. "The crush inside is rather overwhelming. I too find myself in need of occasional escape." He moved to stand beside her at the balustrade, a comfortable distance between them. "Your sisters are the toast of the evening." "As always," Kathleen agreed without rancor. "They are very deserving of the attention." "And you? Do you not deserve attention as well?" Kathleen smiled, appreciating his kindness, but recognizing it for what it was. We all find our place in society, Lord Hathaway. I have made peace with mine. He frowned slightly. That sounds remarkably like surrender, Lady Kathleen, if I may be so bold. You are scarcely 23, hardly at your last prayers. Perhaps not, she conceded, but I am practical. Few men look past Caroline and Amelia to notice me, and fewer still would prefer me to them if they did notice. I have accepted this reality. Reality is often what we make of it, he countered. Your intellect and compassion far exceed— Goodness, Kathleen interrupted, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Listen to us being so dreadfully serious at a ball. Tell me, have you read the new novel by Mrs. Radcliffe? I found it most diverting. Lord Hathaway recognized the deflection but graciously allowed the change of subject. They spoke of books and music, of his travels abroad and the latest political gossip, until Kathleen felt her spirits lift slightly. Lord Hathaway had always been a true friend, one of the few people who seemed to see her as more than simply Caroline and Amelia's forgettable older sister. I should return, she said finally. Mother will be wondering where I've disappeared to. Of course. He offered his arm. May I escort you back? They had just reached the ballroom entrance when a commotion near the main doors drew everyone's attention. The music faltered, conversation dimmed, and a collective intake of breath seemed to sweep through the assembly. Gracious, Lord Hathaway murmured. It appears His Grace has deigned to grace London with his presence at last. His Grace? Kathleen asked, confused. The Duke of Westmoreland. He's been abroad for nearly 2 years, I believe. I'm surprised you don't recognize him. Kathleen strained to see past the crowd. I've never actually met him. He left London shortly before my first season. Ah, that explains it. Well, prepare yourself, Lady Kathleen. Edgar Wallis, the 6th Duke of Westmoreland, has quite an effect on society, particularly the female half. And then the crowd parted, and Kathleen saw him for the first time. The Duke of Westmoreland was tall, powerfully built, with broad shoulders emphasized by his impeccably tailored evening clothes. His dark hair was shorter than was fashionable, and a slight tan suggested time spent outdoors rather than in drawing rooms, both hints of his recent travels. But it was his face that commanded attention. Strong features, a firm jaw, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to cut through the artificial warmth of the ballroom. He moved with a predator's grace, acknowledging greetings with brief nods as he made his way through the crowd. Unlike most aristocrats who cultivated an air of languid boredom, the Duke radiated a contained energy, as if he were merely tolerating the constraints of polite society. They say he's as wealthy as Croesus, Lord Hathaway commented, and twice as demanding. His estate in Derbyshire is said to be magnificent, though few are invited to see it. He's notorious for his disdain of the marriage mart, and has refused countless matches despite his need for an heir. He seems formidable, Kathleen observed. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Intimidating is the word most commonly used, or arrogant, depending on who you ask. Kathleen watched as her mother swiftly maneuvered Caroline and Amelia into the Duke's line of sight. Even from a distance she could read the familiar choreography. Her mother's subtle positioning, Caroline's practiced smile, Amelia's carefully timed glance up through her lashes. The dance of availability, performed to perfection. I believe my sisters are about to be introduced, she said, unable to keep a hint of resignation from her voice. And you? Lord Hathaway asked. Kathleen shook her head. Mother knows better than to waste His Grace's time. Besides, she added with a small smile, I find I'm developing a headache. I think it best I find a quiet corner until it's time to leave. Shall I bring you some tea? You're very kind, but no. Please enjoy the ball. I shall be perfectly fine. Lord Hathaway hesitated, then bowed. As you wish, Lady Kathleen, but should you change your mind, I know where to find you. Thank you, Edward. He smiled at her use of his Christian name. A rare familiarity she allowed herself only when they were effectively alone. With a final, concerned glance, he departed, leaving Kathleen to seek refuge along the ballroom's periphery. She found a small alcove partially concealed by a potted palm, a perfect vantage point from which to observe without being observed. From here, she could see the Duke of Westmoreland, surrounded by eager introductions. Her mother was speaking animatedly, while Caroline and Amelia stood by, the very picture of demure beauty. The Duke was nodding politely, though his expression remained inscrutable. As Kathleen watched, She felt the familiar hollow ache in her chest, not jealousy precisely, but a profound loneliness that seemed to deepen with each passing season. How strange that one could feel so utterly alone while surrounded by hundreds of people. Her father had once told her, in a rare moment of paternal insight, that she had been born in the wrong century. "You think too much, Kathleen," he'd said. "Society doesn't value a thinking woman." It had been meant as an explanation, perhaps even a comfort, but it had only reinforced what she already knew. She did not fit the mold required for success in the marriage mart. The orchestra began again, a lively country dance. Kathleen watched as gentlemen approached her sisters with invitations to dance. Caroline was claimed by Lord Harrington, while Amelia was led onto the floor by Viscount Bennet. Her mother, mission accomplished, had rejoined her father near the card room. And the Duke? Kathleen scanned the room, curious despite herself. He had moved away from the crowd and was now conversing with an older gentleman near the windows. Even in profile, his striking features commanded attention. There was something almost predatory about his stillness, as if he were merely tolerating the social niceties, while his mind was elsewhere entirely. As if sensing her scrutiny, the Duke suddenly turned his head, his gaze sweeping the room until, impossibly, it landed directly on Kathleen in her shadowed alcove. For a breathless moment, those piercing blue eyes seemed to look straight through her carefully constructed defenses, seeing not the forgotten sister, but something else entirely. Kathleen froze, unable to look away. Then, mercifully, someone stepped between them, breaking the connection. She exhaled shakily, her heart racing for no reason she could name. Ridiculous, she chided herself. The man had merely glanced in her direction. It meant nothing. Yet as she gathered her composure and prepared to rejoin the periphery of society where she belonged, Kathleen couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something had fundamentally changed in that brief, impossible moment. She just didn't know what. The Duke of Westmoreland was not a man accustomed to indecision. In the 2 years since he had inherited his title, following his father's unexpected death, Edgar Wallace had managed vast estates, navigated complex political alliances, and reorganized the family's considerable business interests with decisive efficiency. He had sailed to the West Indies to personally inspect his holdings there, spent 6 months in Italy, studying classical architecture for the renovation of his country seat, and successfully negotiated a trade agreement with the East India Company that had doubled his already substantial fortune. In all these endeavors he had acted with the unwavering resolution that was both his greatest strength and, according to his Aunt Augusta, his most infuriating quality. "You decide too quickly and change your mind too rarely," she had told him before his departure for the continent. "A man needs flexibility of thought, Edgar, particularly when it comes to matters of the heart." Edgar had dismissed this advice with the casual arrogance of someone who had never found matters of the heart particularly complicated. Women, in his experience, fell into predictable categories. The simpering debutantes paraded before him since he became one of England's most eligible bachelors, the sophisticated widows who offered pleasure without commitment, and the calculating matchmakers, both maternal and self-appointed, who saw him as nothing more than his title and fortune. None had ever captured his interest beyond momentary diversion. None had challenged his intellect or stirred his soul. None had made him reconsider his comfortable conviction that marriage, while eventually necessary for succession, was a business arrangement best delayed as long as possible. Until tonight. Standing in his temporary London residence, a handsome townhouse in Grosvenor Square that had belonged to the Wallace family for generations, Edgar found himself staring out the window at the pre-dawn sky with an untouched glass of brandy in his hand and a strange restlessness in his spirit. Lady Kathleen Maitland. The name circled in his mind like a persistent melody. He had noticed her immediately upon entering the Wiltshire ball, though he couldn't have explained why. She wasn't the most beautiful woman present. That distinction clearly belonged to her younger sisters, who had been thrust before him with maternal determination. She hadn't been at the center of attention or dressed in the most fashionable gown. In fact, she had been actively trying to blend into the shadows to go unnoticed. Perhaps that was precisely what had caught his attention in a room full of people desperate to be seen. The quiet dignity in her posture, the intelligence in her warm brown eyes, the way she observed everything with a slight tilt of her head, as if cataloguing the world's absurdities for later consideration. And when their gazes had met across the crowded ballroom, that flash of genuine surprise, followed by a vulnerability so quickly masked that he might have imagined it. It had been enough to make him inquire about her identity, a casual question posed to his host that had yielded a dismissive response. "Oh, that's just the eldest Maitland girl. Plain thing, been out for ages with no success. The younger ones are the incomparable beauties. Surely you've met them." "No? Well, come, let me introduce you. Caroline Maitland is considered the most beautiful debutante this season." Edgar had allowed himself to be led through the introductions, noting with detached amusement how the Countess of Sherborne's eyes had calculated his worth even as she cursed. Her daughters were indeed beautiful, in the conventional manner so prized by society. Golden-haired, blue-eyed, with rehearsed smiles and practiced charm. "And your eldest daughter?" he had inquired after the proper pleasantries. "Lady Kathleen, I believe." The Countess had barely concealed her surprise. "Kathleen? Yes, she is somewhere about. Not feeling quite the thing tonight, I fear. Perhaps another time." The dismissal had been so transparent that Edgar had nearly laughed aloud. Instead, he had excused himself as quickly as politeness allowed and spent the remainder of the evening making strategic inquiries about the Maitland family. What he discovered had intrigued him further. The Earl of Sherborne was respected but not particularly wealthy, having invested unwisely in several speculative ventures. The family's position in society depended largely on the successful marriages of their daughters. The two younger girls had received multiple offers, all declined in hopes of securing even more advantageous matches, and Lady Kathleen, the eldest, was regarded as a pleasant but unremarkable fixture of society, intelligent enough, but lacking the beauty or dowry to attract serious suitors. "A confirmed spinster," one matron had confided with the casual cruelty of the tongue. Poor thing. Such a pity when the youngest are blessed with all the beauty. By the time Edgar departed the ball, a plan had already formed in his mind. A plan so unlike his usual methodical approach that he had spent the carriage ride home questioning his own sanity. Yet here he stood, hours later, still contemplating Lady Kathleen Maitland, and the inexplicable certainty that had settled in his chest. She was different from any woman he had ever met, and he needed to know her better. "Your Grace?" Edgar turned to find his valet, Richardson, standing in the doorway with a concerned expression. "You have not retired, sir. Is something amiss?" Edgar glanced at the clock on the mantel. Nearly 5 in the morning. "No, Richardson. Merely thinking." "Very good, sir. Shall I return at the usual hour?" "Yes." "And Richardson?" "Sir, I'll be calling at Sherborne House tomorrow. Today, rather. Have my morning coat pressed and send a message to the stables to have the phaeton ready by 10. If Richardson was surprised by this unexpected social call, he betrayed nothing beyond a slight raising of his eyebrows. "Very good, Your Grace." Left alone again, Edgar finally sipped his brandy, savouring the smooth burn as it slid down his throat. He had not called upon a lady socially, outside of formal events or specific business, in years. Society would take immediate notice, rumours would spread and expectations would form. The Countess of Sherborne would undoubtedly interpret his visit as interest in one of her younger daughters, an assumption he would need to correct firmly and immediately. But first he needed to speak with Lady Kathleen herself, to confirm that his instincts, usually so reliable in matters of business, had not led him astray in this most personal of ventures. With a decisiveness that would have made his aunt smile knowingly, Edgar set down his glass and headed to his bedchamber. A few hours' sleep, and then he would set in motion a courtship unlike any the ton had witnessed in recent memory. Let society gossip. Let the matchmaking mummers speculate. Let the younger Maitland sisters preen and posture. Edgar Wallace, Duke of Westmoreland, had made his decision. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that seemed designed to mock Kathleen's dour mood. She had slept poorly, troubled by strange dreams, in which piercing blue eyes followed her through endless ballrooms. Breakfast had been a trial, with her mother and sisters dissecting every moment of the previous evening's triumph. "The Duke spoke with me for a full 5 minutes," Caroline was saying, as she delicately buttered a piece of toast. "He asked about my interests in music and art. Very attentive. He admired my fan," Amelia added, not to be outdone. "He said the craftsmanship was exquisite. French, of course." "His Grace is the most eligible bachelor in England," their mother reminded them, as if they could possibly have forgotten this essential fact. "A match with the Duke of Westmoreland would elevate our family beyond all expectations. Your father would be beside himself with pride." "Where is father this morning?" Kathleen asked, attempting to divert the conversation. "Meeting with his solicitor," her mother replied with a slight frown. "Something about those investments in the West Indies. Nothing for you girls to concern yourselves with." Kathleen knew better. The family's finances had been precarious for years, a fact her father tried to hide, but which she had discerned through careful observation and the occasional glimpse of correspondence left carelessly on his desk. A favorable marriage for at least one of her sisters had become not merely desirable but necessary. "I believe the Duke may call today," Caroline announced with practiced nonchalance. "He mentioned his admiration for English gardens. I made sure to tell him that ours, while modest, has been featured in Mrs. Wilton's Gardens of Distinction." Their mother beamed. "Excellent thinking, my dear. We shall have tea served in the garden room, should he call. Kathleen, do instruct Mrs. Winters to prepare those special lemon cakes His Grace might enjoy." "Yes, mother," Kathleen replied, rising from the table. At least in the kitchen, she might find some peace from the endless speculation about the Duke's intentions. She had just finished consulting with the cook when Simmons, their butler, appeared in the doorway with an expression of barely suppressed excitement. "The Duke of Westmoreland's carriage has been sighted turning onto our street, miss." "Heavens!" Kathleen exclaimed. "Thank you, Simmons. Please inform my mother immediately." The household erupted into controlled chaos. Maids scurried to ensure the drawing room was immaculate. Her mother dispatched Caroline and Amelia to change into fresh morning dresses, and Kathleen found herself pressed into service, arranging flowers that had already been perfectly arranged the day before. "Kathleen," her mother hissed as she passed, "do try to make yourself scarce once the initial greetings are complete. Your sisters must have every advantage." The casual dismissal stung, but Kathleen merely nodded. This was nothing new. Her role in these situations was well established. Be polite, be brief, and be gone. She was still adjusting a recalcitrant Lily when Simmons's formal announcement echoed through the foyer. "His Grace, the Duke of Westmoreland." Kathleen remained in the garden room, listening to the murmur of greetings from the drawing room across the hall. She would give them a few minutes before making her obligatory appearance, brief curtsy, and graceful exit. "Lady Kathleen, there you are." She nearly dropped the vase. The Duke of Westmoreland stood in the doorway, his tall frame dominating the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with presence. In daylight, he was even more striking than he had been the previous evening, his blue eyes more intense, the planes of his face more sharply defined. "Your Grace," she managed, dipping into a curtsy. Forgive me. I was just arranging these flowers. My mother and sisters are in the drawing room." "So I was informed," he replied, making no move to return to their company. Instead, he stepped further into the room, his gaze taking in the blooms she had been fussing with. "Lilies. My mother favored them as well." Kathleen blinked at this unexpected personal detail. "They're quite beautiful, though somewhat temperamental," she said, then immediately regretted the mundane observation. Goodness! She sounded like a nervous schoolgirl. To her surprise, the Duke's mouth curved slightly. "Much like the aristocracy, wouldn't you say? Was that humour? From the famously stern Duke of Westmoreland?" "I couldn't possibly comment, Your Grace," she replied carefully, though she couldn't quite suppress her own smile. "It would be most improper." "And you are always proper, Lady Kathleen?" There was something in his tone, a genuine curiosity rather than mockery, that made her consider the question seriously. "I try to be," she admitted, "though I find society's definition of propriety often lacks nuance." His eyebrows rose slightly, as if he hadn't expected such candor. A diplomatic yet honest response, refreshing. Before Kathleen could reply, her mother appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. "Your Grace, I see you've found our garden room. Kathleen, dear, I'm sure His Grace would prefer to join us in the drawing room, where refreshments are being served." The Duke turned, his expression cooling noticeably. "Actually, Countess, I was hoping to speak with Lady Kathleen. Perhaps she might show me the gardens your daughter Caroline praised so highly." Kathleen couldn't have said who was more shocked by this request, herself or her mother. The Countess recovered first, her social training overriding her confusion. Of course, though I fear they are hardly at their best this early in the season. Perhaps Caroline might accompany you both. She has taken a particular interest in horticulture recently. Another time, perhaps, the Duke said firmly. Lady Kathleen? Put on the spot, Kathleen could only nod. I would be honoured, Your Grace. Her mother's expression was a study in conflicted emotions, disbelief warring with the inability to contradict a duke. Well, very well. Kathleen, do remember that Lady Harrington and her daughter are expected at 11. The warning was clear. Do not monopolise the Duke's time. Yes, Mother. The Duke offered his arm, and Kathleen placed her fingertips lightly upon it, acutely aware of the impropriety of walking unchaperoned with a gentleman, Duke or no. But her mother seemed unable or unwilling to object further, and so they proceeded through the French doors and into the small but well-maintained garden behind Sherborne House. For several minutes they walked in silence. Kathleen pointed out various plantings, the rose bushes still dormant but promising summer splendor, the early spring bulbs adding color to otherwise bare beds, the small fountain that served as the garden's centerpiece. The Duke listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of botany. You are familiar with gardens, Your Grace, she ventured, as they paused beside a bench nestled among flowering shrubs. My estate in Derbyshire has extensive grounds, he replied. I spent much of my childhood exploring them, and during my recent travels I made a study of Italian garden design. I find there is something restorative about cultivated nature. The perfect balance between wildness and order, Kathleen said without thinking. He looked at her sharply, those penetrating blue eyes seeming to see far more than she intended to reveal. Precisely. You have an understanding of such balance, Lady Kathleen. She hesitated. Conversations with gentlemen typically followed predictable patterns: the weather, recent social events, superficial inquiries about health and family. This direct, almost philosophical question was uncharted territory. I believe most of life is a search for that balance, she said finally, between duty and desire, tradition and progress, caution and courage. We are all gardeners of our own experiences, attempting to cultivate beauty within the boundaries we're given. The moment the words left her mouth, Kathleen wanted to call them back. How absurdly philosophical. He would think her a blue-stocking, or worse, affected. She braced herself for polite dismissal. Instead, the Duke regarded her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Surprise, certainly, but also something warmer, more approving. Most women of my acquaintance would have answered with some rehearsed pleasantry about the beauty of flowers, he said quietly. Thank you for not being most women, Lady Kathleen. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. I fear my mother would disagree with your assessment, Your Grace. She often laments my tendency toward plain speaking. Then, with all due respect to the Countess, I find her judgment lacking in this instance. He gestured toward the bench. May we sit? There is a matter I wish to discuss with you. Curious and increasingly bewildered by this strange encounter, Kathleen seated herself, smoothing her muslin gown with nervous hands. The Duke sat beside her, maintaining a proper distance, yet somehow giving the impression of intimate conversation. Lady Kathleen, he began, then paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. I find myself in an unusual position. We are practically strangers, yet I feel compelled to speak with a directness that may surprise you. You have my full attention, Your Grace, she said, her heart suddenly racing. He studied her face for a moment longer, then continued. I returned to England with the intention of finally fulfilling my duty to my title. My aunt has been most insistent that, at 35, it is past time I secured the succession. Ah, Kathleen thought, her momentary hope fading. He wishes to discuss Caroline or Amelia. Perhaps he is asking for my assessment of their characters before making his intentions known. In the 2 years I've been abroad, the Duke continued, I have given considerable thought to what qualities I seek in a duchess. Beauty fades, fortune I have in abundance. Connections, while useful, are secondary to more essential traits. And what traits do you consider essential, Your Grace? She asked, attempting to maintain her composure, despite the hollow feeling expanding in her chest. Intelligence, integrity, compassion without sentimentality, strength of character. A partner who sees the title as a responsibility rather than a prize. His gaze was unwavering. A woman who speaks of finding balance between wildness and order, and means it. Kathleen stared at him, uncomprehending. Surely he couldn't be implying. Lady Kathleen, I observed you last evening, not merely your beauty, which is considerable despite what society may say, but your character, the way you attended to Lord Hathaway's conversation with genuine interest, your patience with your mother's dismissals, the dignity with which you carry yourself in a world determined to overlook you. In the space of one evening, you intrigued me more than any woman of my acquaintance has in 35 years. Your Grace, she began, her voice scarcely above a whisper, I fear there has been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, he said firmly. I am not a man given to romantic flights of fancy, Lady Kathleen. I am, however, a man who recognizes value where others see only conventional expectations. I would like your permission to call on you, not your sister's, with the intention of becoming better acquainted. Kathleen felt as though the ground beneath the bench had suddenly disappeared. This couldn't possibly be happening. The Duke of Westmoreland, the most eligible bachelor in England, was asking to court her. It defied all logic, all social expectation. Why? The question escaped before she could apply proper filters of politeness. Instead of taking offense, he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his austere features and made her breath catch. Because when our eyes met across that ballroom, Lady Kathleen, I saw a kindred spirit. A woman who, like myself, observes the absurdities of society while navigating its waters. A woman of substance, in a world that too often values only surface. You cannot know that from a mere glance, she protested weakly. Perhaps not, he conceded. Which is precisely why I am asking permission to call on you properly, to discover whether my instincts are correct. My sisters are lovely young women who will make suitable matches, I have no doubt, but I did not come to London for them. I came for a woman of maturity and intelligence. I believe I may have found her. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Unless, of course, you find me objectionable. The absurdity of the statement, that she, the overlooked spinster daughter, could find the Duke of Westmoreland objectionable, startled a laugh from her. Objectionable? Your Grace, half the unmarried women in London would swoon at your feet if propriety allowed. I am not concerned with half the women in London, he replied. Only one. Will you allow me to call on you, Lady Kathleen? She should say no. This bizarre courtship could only end in disappointment. Once he spent more time in her company, he would realize his mistake. The ton would laugh behind their hands at the presumption of plain Kathleen Maitland capturing the interest of the Duke of Westmoreland. Her mother would be mortified. And yet, yes, she heard herself say. You may call on me, Your Grace. His expression remained composed, but she could have sworn a flash of genuine pleasure lit his eyes. Excellent. I shall return tomorrow, if that is convenient. Perhaps we might discuss that volume of poetry I noticed on the side table. Wordsworth, was it not? Kathleen nodded, still dazed. You have a sharp eye, Your Grace. Edgar, he said suddenly, when we are relatively alone, I would be honored if you would use my given name. Edgar, she repeated softly, testing the intimacy of it. It suits you. As Kathleen suits you. He rose, offering his hand to assist her. We should return before the Countess sends a search party. As they walked back toward the house, Kathleen's mind raced with questions and disbelief. This couldn't possibly be real. Yet the solid presence of the Duke beside her, the lingering warmth of his hand on hers as he had helped her rise, the intentness of his gaze when he spoke, all felt undeniably tangible. Your Grace, she said, as they neared the French doors, unable to contain her uncertainty any longer. I must ask once more, why me? There are countless women in London with greater beauty, larger dowries, more illustrious connections. Edgar stopped, turning to face her fully. His expression was solemn, his blue eyes holding hers with unwavering certainty. Because, Lady Kathleen Maitland, I did not come to London seeking beauty or fortune or connections. I came seeking a duchess who would be a true partner, not merely an ornament or a broodmare. His voice lowered, meant for her ears alone. At every ball since my return, men have asked me about the latest beauties, the newest heiresses, the most advantageous matches. Last night, when I saw you standing apart from it all with quiet dignity, I knew. I came for you, not them. And with those words, The same words he had whispered in that tantalizing glimpse of the synopsis she had been given. Kathleen felt something long dormant within her begin to stir. Not merely hope, though that was certainly part of it, but a sense of possibility she had thought forever beyond her reach. The Duke of Westmoreland, Edgar, was offering her a chance to be seen, truly seen. And for a woman who had spent years being overlooked, there could be no greater gift. News of the Duke of Westmoreland's interest in Lady Kathleen Maitland spread through London society like wildfire. By the third consecutive day of his calling at Sherborne House, each visit lasting precisely 1 hour, conducted with impeccable propriety yet undeniable purpose, speculation had reached fever pitch. They say he specifically requested her company. Can you imagine? Lady Harrington whispered behind her fan to the Viscountess Blackwell during a musical evening at Berkeley Square. Passed over both the younger sisters without so much as a second glance. Perhaps he prefers mature women, the Viscountess replied with a meaningful arch of her eyebrow. Though at 23, mature seems rather generous. Past her prime would be more accurate. Well, I heard from Lady Fitzwilliam, whose maid's cousin serves at Sherborne House, that the Countess was beside herself. Apparently she tried to maneuver Caroline into the drawing room during the Duke's second visit, and he all but ignored the poor girl. How extraordinary. And what about the girl herself? Kathleen? Is she encouraging this bizarre attention? Lady Harrington's fan fluttered faster. That's the strangest part. By all accounts, she seems as bewildered as everyone else. No simpering, no obvious artifice. Either she's a superior actress or she genuinely didn't scheme for his attentions. There must be something we're missing. A secret engagement, perhaps? A prior connection? No man, especially not one as calculating as Westmoreland, bestows such marked preference without reason. Whatever the reason, Lady Harrington concluded with relish, the ton hasn't witnessed such an unexpected courtship in years. I, for one, am thoroughly entertained. Across town in the elegantly appointed drawing room of Sherborne House, Kathleen sat stiffly on a settee, her hands folded in her lap, as her mother paced before her like a general preparing for battle. "This has gone on long enough," the Countess declared. 3 visits in 3 days and still no clarification of his intentions. It's most irregular. Kathleen refrained from pointing out that her mother had never before concerned herself with the intentions of Kathleen's non-existent suitors. "His Grace has been a perfect gentleman, Mother. I'm sure he will make his intentions clear in due course." "But why you?" The question burst from the Countess with the force of days of suppressed bewilderment. "Forgive me, Kathleen, but you must admit this attention is unexpected." The words stung, even though Kathleen had asked herself the same question repeatedly. "I cannot presume to understand His Grace's reasoning." Her mother sank into a chair, genuine distress replacing her usual composure. "You must understand my concern. If this is some strange game, or worse, if his intentions are dishonorable—" "Mother," Kathleen exclaimed, shocked. "The Duke of Westmoreland has given no indication of anything improper. His conversation has been intellectual and respectful. He speaks of literature, philosophy, his travels abroad." "Literature and philosophy," the Countess muttered, "of all things to discuss with a potential bride." "No one has mentioned marriage," Kathleen reminded her, though the very word sent an unsettling flutter through her chest. "He is merely calling, as gentlemen often do on young ladies of good family." "Gentlemen do not call 3 days in succession on the plainest daughter when her beautiful sisters sit neglected in the same house," her mother retorted. "It defies all convention, all logic." Kathleen flinched. "Thank you for that assessment of my charms, Mother." The Countess's expression softened slightly. "Oh, Kathleen, you know I didn't mean it unkindly. You have many fine qualities, your intelligence, your deportment, your skill at the pianoforte. But beauty has never been chief among them, and we have always been practical about that fact." "Yes," Kathleen agreed quietly, "we have always been practical." A long silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken tensions that had accumulated over years of subtle dismissals and redirected attentions. Finally, the Countess sighed. "Your father wishes to speak with the Duke, to ascertain his intentions directly." Alarm shot through Kathleen. Surely that's premature. It's been only 3 days. 3 days of unprecedented attention from England's most eligible bachelor to a daughter long considered beyond her last prayers, her mother countered. The ton is already buzzing with speculation. Your sisters are increasingly confused. And your father? She hesitated. Your father has concerns beyond the merely social. Kathleen understood immediately. Financial concerns. Her mother's face tightened. That is not for you to worry about. But it is why father is so eager to clarify the Duke's intentions, Kathleen pressed. If there is a potential alliance with such wealth and status— Enough, the Countess interrupted, rising. Your father will handle this matter as he sees fit. In the meantime, you will continue to receive the Duke's calls with appropriate modesty, neither encourage nor discourage his attentions until we better understand his purpose. And if his purpose is genuine interest in me? Kathleen asked, voicing the question that had kept her awake for 3 nights running. What then, mother? The Countess paused at the doorway, her expression unreadable. Then we shall all have to adjust our expectations accordingly. She departed without another word, leaving Kathleen alone with her thoughts. Genuine interest. The concept still seemed fantastical, despite the evidence of Edgar's consistent attention. Their conversations had been stimulating, ranging from Wordsworth's poetry to the architectural wonders of Rome, from agricultural innovations to the political implications of Bonaparte's campaigns. He listened to her opinions with genuine consideration, sometimes agreeing, sometimes challenging her assertions with thoughtful counter-arguments. Not once had he commented on her appearance, complimented her gown, or paid the kind of superficial compliments that gentlemen typically bestowed on young ladies. Instead, he treated her as an equal intellect, a fact so refreshing it almost made up for the growing awkwardness with her family. Almost, but not quite. Caroline had been coldly polite since the Duke's first visit, her customary affection replaced by brittle civility. Amelia, less practiced in social navigation, vacillated between confused hurt and genuine curiosity about Kathleen's sudden elevation. "What do you even talk about for so long?" she had asked yesterday, perched on the edge of Kathleen's bed as they prepared for sleep. "Is he very romantic? Does he bring you flowers and whisper sweet nothings?" "Goodness, no," Kathleen had laughed. "We discuss books and ideas, his travels and my interests. It's all very proper." Amelia's nose had wrinkled in disappointment. "That sounds terribly dull, but I suppose dukes can be dull if they wish and still be considered fascinating." The observation, innocent as it was, had struck uncomfortably close to a fear Kathleen dared not voice. That Edgar's interest stemmed not from genuine attraction, but from some obscure calculation. Perhaps, having reached 35, he had decided that an intelligent, grateful spinster would make a more biddable duchess than a beautiful, sought-after debutante accustomed to admiration. A tap at the drawing-room door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Simmons entered, his formal demeanor betraying just a hint of the excitement that had gripped the entire household. "Lord Hathaway to see you, my lady." "Edward." Kathleen felt a rush of genuine pleasure. "Please show him in, Simmons." Lord Hathaway entered moments later, looking as comfortable and reassuring as always, in his well-cut but not overly fashionable coat. His kind eyes crinkled with warmth as he bowed over her offered hand. "Lady Kathleen, you're looking well." "Edward, how lovely to see you. Please sit." She gestured to the chair opposite her settee. "Would you care for tea?" "No, thank you. I cannot stay long." He settled into the chair, studying her face with the frankness of long acquaintance. "I've come to see how you're faring amidst the storm of gossip currently engulfing London society." Kathleen sighed, relaxing into the comfort of honest conversation. "Is it very bad?" "Merely unprecedented," he assured her. "The Ton thrives on novelty, and the Duke of Westmoreland's attentions to you have provided the most delicious surprise of the season." "How flattering," she said dryly. "My unexpected suitability as an object of interest." Edward chuckled. "Come now, you know what I mean. Westmoreland has spent years deflecting the most determined matchmaking mummers. His sudden interest in anyone would have caused a sensation. And his interest in plain, overlooked Kathleen Maitland merely compounds the astonishment," she finished for him, unable to keep a trace of bitterness from her voice. His expression softened. "Kathleen, you know I've never found you plain or overlooked. The Duke, it seems, shares my discernment." The gentle reminder of his long-standing appreciation warmed her. Edward had been a steadfast friend for years, never pressuring her with unwanted romantic overtures, but always making his admiration clear. "Thank you, Edward. You've always been kind." "Not kind," he corrected. "Honest. But my opinion is irrelevant at present. What matters is how you feel about the Duke's attentions. Are they welcome?" Kathleen hesitated, uncertain how to articulate the complex emotions of the past few days. "They are unexpected. Flattering, certainly. And yet... I cannot help wondering why," she admitted. "Why now? Why me? The Duke could have his pick of London's most beautiful, accomplished young ladies. What could he possibly see in someone like me?" Edward leaned forward, his expression serious. "Perhaps he sees what I have always seen, a woman of intelligence, compassion, and quiet strength. Not all men are blinded by conventional beauty or impressed by practiced charm, Kathleen." "That's what he said," she murmured, almost to herself, "that he wanted a partner of substance, not an ornament. There you have it, then. The man has good sense." Edward paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "I hope you will not think me presumptuous, but as your friend I must ask, has the Duke declared himself? Made his intentions explicit?" Kathleen shook her head. "No. We merely converse, though he did ask permission to use my Christian name when we are relatively private." Edward's eyebrows rose. "Indeed. That suggests a certain seriousness of intent." "Or merely the casual privilege of rank," she countered. "Dukes are accustomed to doing as they please." "Westmoreland is not known for casual anything," Edward said thoughtfully. "His reputation is one of purpose and precision. If he has singled you out for attention, I would wager it is with definite intent." Before Kathleen could respond, the drawing-room door opened again, and Caroline entered, her golden beauty enhanced by a morning dress of pale blue silk that matched her eyes perfectly. "Lord Hathaway," she exclaimed with practiced delight, "what a pleasant surprise." Edward rose, bowing politely. "Lady Caroline, you're looking well." "Thank you." She glided into the room with the effortless grace that had captivated countless suitors. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," Kathleen assured her, though she couldn't help noticing the calculating gleam in her sister's eye. "Lord Hathaway was just leaving, I believe." "Indeed." Edward reached for his hat. "I have an appointment at my club. Lady Kathleen, Lady Caroline, a pleasure as always." As soon as he had departed, Caroline turned to Kathleen with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How cozy. I hadn't realized Lord Hathaway still called on you." "Edward is an old friend," Kathleen replied evenly. "He was merely being kind." Caroline settled onto the settee, arranging her skirts with deliberate precision. One wonders if his kindness might have blossomed into something more had the Duke not suddenly appeared. The implication was clear, that Edward had been Kathleen's only prospect, now potentially squandered in pursuit of the Duke's more glittering attention. "Edward and I have always been friends," Kathleen said firmly. "Nothing more." "If you say so." Caroline examined her perfectly manicured nails. "Though it would be a shame to lose the certainty of a baron for the possibility of a duke." Kathleen regarded her sister with growing irritation. "There is no certainty or possibility to discuss. Lord Hathaway has never offered for me, and the Duke has merely called a few times for conversation. 3 times in 3 days is hardly merely calling, Kathleen. The whole of London is talking about it." Caroline's composure slipped slightly. "Mother is beside herself, father is in constant meetings with his solicitor, and Amelia and I are fielding the most impertinent questions everywhere we go. It's most inconsiderate." "Inconsiderate?" Kathleen echoed, incredulous. "I have done nothing to encourage this situation." "Haven't you?" Caroline's blue eyes narrowed. "You must have done something to attract his notice. The Duke of Westmoreland doesn't bestow his attention randomly." The accusation, so similar to Kathleen's own private doubts, stung sharply. "I assure you I am as mystified as anyone. If you find the situation uncomfortable, imagine how I feel." "Uncomfortable?" Caroline laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "I should think you'd be ecstatic. After 5 seasons of complete invisibility, to suddenly have the most eligible bachelor in England at your feet. It's a fairy tale come true." "He is hardly at my feet," Kathleen protested. "And I would thank you to remember that not all of us measure our worth by the number of suitors we collect." Caroline's cheeks flushed with anger. "Is that what you think of me? That I collect suitors like trinkets?" Perhaps I've simply had the luxury of choice, a luxury you've never experienced." The barb found its mark with unerring precision. Kathleen felt her own temper flare. "And perhaps you've had that luxury because Mother has spent years ensuring that every eligible gentleman sees you and Amelia at your best advantage, while I have been relegated to the role of convenient chaperone." The moment the words left her mouth, Kathleen regretted them. Such open acknowledgement of their mother's favoritism violated the unspoken compact that had maintained peace in their household for years. Caroline's expression shifted from anger to something more complex, discomfort mixed with a grudging recognition of truth. "That's not... I never asked for special treatment." "No," Kathleen agreed more gently, "you didn't. You are genuinely beautiful and charming, Caroline. Your success in society is well-deserved." "But," her sister prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification, "but it would be kind if you could allow me this unexpected attention without making me feel guilty for receiving it." Caroline looked away, her perfect profile outlined against the window light. For a moment, Kathleen glimpsed the vulnerable girl beneath the polished social facade, the sister she had read stories to, whose scraped knees she had bandaged, whose first heartbreak she had soothed with quiet understanding. "I'm not angry that the Duke is calling on you," Caroline said finally, her voice softer. "I'm confused and perhaps a little afraid." "Afraid? Of what?" Caroline met her gaze directly. "Of change. If the Duke's interest is serious, if he offers for you, everything will be different. You'll outrank us all. You'll have precedence over Mother, over future wives Amelia and I might secure. The sister who has always stood in our shadow will suddenly cast the longest shadow of all." The naked honesty was so unexpected that Kathleen momentarily lacked a response. The social implications of becoming a duchess, should such an unlikely event ever occur, had barely crossed her mind amid the more immediate bewilderment of Edgar's attention. "Caroline," she said finally, "even if the Duke were to offer for me, which remains highly unlikely, I would still be your sister first. No title could change that." "Wouldn't it?" Caroline's smile held a wisdom beyond her 19 years. "Titles change everything, Kathleen. That's what we've been taught our entire lives." Before Kathleen could respond, Simmons appeared again in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Pardon the interruption, my ladies. His Grace, the Duke of Westmoreland, has arrived." Caroline rose immediately, smoothing her skirts and patting her already perfect curls. "How fortunate. I shall be delighted to greet him." "Actually, miss," Simmons continued with the barest hint of discomfort, "His Grace has asked specifically to speak with the Earl. They are closeted in the study at present." The sisters exchanged a startled glance. The Duke, meeting privately with their father. There was only one conventional explanation for such a meeting, and it sent Kathleen's heart racing with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. "Did His Grace indicate how long he expected to be engaged with Father?" Kathleen asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "No, my lady, but the Earl instructed me to inform the Countess that they were not to be disturbed." "I see. Thank you, Simmons." When the butler had withdrawn, Caroline turned to Kathleen with wide eyes. "Kathleen, do you think he's asking for your hand?" "It's far too soon," Kathleen protested, though her pulse had accelerated at the mere possibility. "We've barely become acquainted. When has that ever mattered among the nobility?" Caroline countered. "Especially at the Duke's age. He likely wants to secure his succession without further delay." The crude assessment sent a chill through Kathleen. Is that all this was? A calculated decision to select a bride based on practical considerations rather than deeper attachment? "You're getting ahead of yourself," she told her sister, as much to convince herself as Caroline. "This could be about any number of matters. What other business could the Duke of Westmoreland possibly have with Father?" Caroline asked skeptically. "They move in entirely different social and political circles. No, Kathleen, he's making an offer. I'd wager my new French bonnet on it." Kathleen stood abruptly, unable to remain still under the weight of mounting anxiety. "Excuse me. I need some air." She fled the drawing room before Caroline could reply, seeking refuge in the small library that had always been her sanctuary in times of emotional turmoil. The familiar scent of leather bindings and lemon polish calmed her somewhat as she paced between the shelves trying to organize her chaotic thoughts. If Edgar was indeed asking for her hand, an astounding possibility that still felt more like fantasy than reality. What answer would she give? In just 3 days, he had awakened feelings she had long suppressed. Hope, possibility, the dangerous luxury of being desired. His conversation stimulated her intellect. His rare smiles sent warmth cascading through her chest. His intense gaze made her feel truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. But was that enough? Could she commit herself to a lifetime with a man she barely knew, based on a handful of conversations and the unprecedented miracle of his preference for her over more conventional beauties? And what of his motivations? Caroline's blunt assessment echoed uncomfortably in her mind. He likely wants to secure his succession without further delay. Was she merely a convenient solution to a ducal obligation? A woman unlikely to refuse such an elevated offer, grateful for any attention after years of neglect. The library door opened, interrupting her spiral of uncertainty. Her father stood in the doorway, his expression a complex mixture of satisfaction and concern. "Ah, Kathleen, I thought I might find you here." He entered, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk, my dear." Kathleen's heart seemed to stop, then resume at twice its normal pace. "Father, is everything all right?" The Earl of Sherborne was a distinguished man of 55, his once dark hair now liberally streaked with silver. He had always treated Kathleen with affectionate if somewhat distracted regard, appreciating her practicality and intelligence, while focusing his ambitions on her more socially promising sisters. "All right," he chuckled, moving to the sideboard where a decanter of brandy stood ready. "I should say so. The Duke of Westmoreland has just done me the honor of requesting permission to court you formally with the explicit intention of making you his Duchess." Though she had begun to suspect it, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a wave of dizziness through Kathleen. She gripped the back of a nearby chair for support. "He has." "Indeed?" Her father poured himself a small measure of brandy, his hand remarkably steady. "I must confess, Kathleen, I was as surprised as anyone when the Duke first called. 3 days ago, I would have wagered my best hunter that such an alliance was beyond imagining." "And now?" Kathleen asked, finding her voice. The Earl sipped his brandy, regarding her thoughtfully over the rim of the glass. "Now I find myself faced with the very real possibility of seeing my eldest daughter become one of the highest-ranking ladies in England. It is unexpected, to say the least. Did you give him permission?" The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. "I did." Her father set down his glass. "Though I made it clear that the final decision rests entirely with you. The Duke was most insistent on that point himself. He emphasized that he seeks a willing partnership, not a mere dynastic alliance." Kathleen sank into the chair she had been gripping, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is overwhelming." "Yes, I imagine it is." The Earl's expression softened with genuine affection. "The Duke speaks very highly of you, Kathleen. He praised your intelligence, your character, your dignity, qualities I have always seen in you, though perhaps not appreciated as fully as I should have." The acknowledgement, coming after years of feeling overlooked, brought a sudden sting of tears to Kathleen's eyes. "Thank you, Father." He came to stand beside her chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I want you to know that while this match would be advantageous for our family in many ways, I will not pressure you to accept. If, after a proper courtship, you find you cannot regard the Duke with genuine affection, you have my full support in declining his offer." The assurance, so different from what Kathleen had expected, released some of the tension that had been building within her. "Truly?" "Truly." He squeezed her shoulder. "I may not have always shown it as I should, but your happiness matters to me, Kathleen. A duchess's coronet would ill compensate for a lifetime of unhappiness." Tears spilled onto her cheeks before she could prevent them. "I don't know what to say." "You need say nothing at present. The Duke has proposed a formal courtship of 1 month, after which he intends to make his offer. You have that time to determine your own feelings." Her father paused. "He is waiting in the drawing-room now, hoping to speak with you briefly before taking his leave. Shall I tell him you're indisposed?" Kathleen quickly wiped her tears, drawing a deep breath to compose herself. "No, I will see him." "Very well." The Earl helped her to her feet. "Remember, Kathleen, that while the Duke of Westmoreland may command the deference of society, in matters of the heart, your authority is absolute. Never forget that." With that surprisingly gentle advice, he escorted her to the drawing-room, where Edgar waited, tall and imposing by the fireplace. The Duke turned as they entered, his gaze immediately finding Kathleen's with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your Grace," the Earl said formally, "my daughter has consented to speak with you. I shall leave you to converse for a few moments. The Countess will join you shortly." Edgar bowed. "Thank you, Lord Sherborne." When her father had departed, closing the door behind him but leaving it pointedly ajar for propriety's sake, Edgar took a step toward Kathleen, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Lady Kathleen, I hope I have not caused you distress by speaking with your father." Kathleen clasped her hands tightly to prevent them from trembling. "Not distress, Your Grace. Surprise, perhaps." "Edgar," he reminded her gently, "when we are alone, or nearly so." "Edgar." The name felt intimate on her tongue, a small act of daring. "My father has informed me of your request, and your thoughts on the matter." His voice was carefully neutral, but she detected an underlying tension in the set of his shoulders, the slight furrow of his brow. Kathleen chose her words deliberately. "I am honored by your regard, and confused by it, if I may speak plainly." "I would have nothing less than plain speaking between us," he assured her. "What confuses you? Why me?" The question that had haunted her since his first visit finally escaped. "Of all the eligible women in London, why have you chosen to single out someone so unremarkable?" Edgar's expression softened in a way that transformed his austere features. "Is that how you see yourself? Unremarkable?" "It is how society has seen me for 5 seasons," she replied with simple honesty. "Until 3 days ago, I was merely the eldest Maitland daughter, plain Kathleen, the spinster sister to beautiful Caroline and Amelia." "Then society is blind," Edgar said, his voice deepening with conviction. "And I thank Providence for that blindness, for it has preserved you from fortune hunters and fools until I could return to England and discover your worth." The words, spoken with such intensity, sent warmth spreading through Kathleen's chest. Yet doubt lingered. "You barely know me. I know enough to recognize what I have been seeking." He took another step closer, close enough that she could detect the subtle scent of sandalwood and clean linen. "A woman of intelligence and character, a woman who speaks her mind, a woman who has maintained her dignity despite society's shallow judgments." "Those are admirable qualities in a friend," Kathleen acknowledged, "but a wife, a duchess, requires more, surely." Edgar's gaze held hers steadily. "What do you believe a duchess requires, Kathleen?" She considered the question seriously. "Beauty, to adorn her husband's arm at state functions. Social grace, to manage elaborate entertainments. Confidence, to navigate the highest circles of society. Superficialities," he dismissed. "Any finishing school can produce such accomplishments. I seek substance beyond the veneer. And you believe I possess this substance?" "I know you do." His certainty was unwavering. "I have spent 2 years contemplating the qualities I desire in the woman who will share my life and title. In 3 days of conversation with you, I have found more depth, more genuine character, than in countless evenings with society's most celebrated beauties." Kathleen felt her resistance weakening under the sincerity of his regard. Yet one final doubt remained, too important to leave unspoken. "And what of affection, of deeper feeling? Does that factor into your calculations?" For the first time, Edgar appeared momentarily disconcerted. "I am not a man given to romantic excesses, as I believe I mentioned during our first conversation, but I can state with complete honesty that I feel a connection to you unlike any I have experienced before. Whether that connection might deepen into something more profound, only time will tell." He paused, studying her expression. "And your feelings, Kathleen? Do they enter into your considerations?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. How did she feel about the Duke of Westmoreland? Attracted, certainly. What woman wouldn't be drawn to his commanding presence, his fierce intelligence, his rare but transformative smile? Intrigued by his conversation, his worldview, his unexpected interest in her opinions. Flattered by his attention, undeniably. But love? It was far too soon for such declarations, even in the privacy of her own heart. "I find your company stimulating," she said carefully. "Your conversation engaging, your perspective enlightening. I am drawn to you in ways I did not anticipate. Then we begin from a similar position." Edgar's expression lightened slightly. I have proposed to your father a formal courtship of 1 month, after which, should our feelings align, I will make my offer. Does this arrangement meet with your approval? A month, 4 weeks to determine whether the Duke's unprecedented interest could develop into a foundation for lifetime partnership. Whether she, overlooked Kathleen Maitland, could truly imagine herself as the Duchess of Westmoreland. It does, she heard herself say, though I must warn you, your Gras, Edgar. Society will talk incessantly. At this, a genuine smile curved his lips. Let them talk. I have never governed my actions by society's expectations, and I don't intend to begin now. He reached for her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that remained proper, yet felt intensely personal. Until tomorrow, Kathleen. Until tomorrow, she echoed, suddenly breathless. As Edgar departed with formal bows to her hastily summoned mother, Kathleen remained rooted to the spot, her hand still tingling from the brief contact. The world had shifted on its axis in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The Duke of Westmoreland wanted to court her, intended to make her his Duchess. And for the first time in years, Kathleen Maitland allowed herself to hope for a future, beyond the narrow confines society had prescribed for her. The following 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind of unprecedented activity for Kathleen. Edgar called every day, sometimes taking her for drives in his elegant phaeton through Hyde Park, where their appearance together caused such a sensation that one elderly dowager nearly toppled from her carriage in shock, and other times engaging in quiet conversation in Sherborne House's drawing room under her mother's increasingly less hostile supervision. As their courtship progressed publicly, London society's initial astonishment gradually transformed into reluctant acceptance. The ton, ever adaptable when faced with power and rank, began to discover previously unnoticed virtues in the eldest Maitland daughter. Lady Kathleen has such dignified carriage, observed ladies who had previously deemed her posture unremarkable. Her conversation is remarkably intelligent, noted gentlemen who had spent years ignoring her presence at social gatherings. Those eyes are really quite striking when one takes the time to notice, admitted debutantes, who had formerly dismissed her as hopelessly plain. The Countess of Sherborne, after her initial disbelief, had quickly recalibrated her maternal ambitions. If one daughter must outrank the others, better it be the one least likely to overshadow her mother's continuing social aspirations for the younger girls. The Duke clearly values substance over surface beauty, she told her intimate circle, with newfound appreciation for her eldest daughter's attributes. Kathleen has always been the intellectual of the family. Caroline and Amelia had traversed their own journeys of adjustment. After the initial shock, and in Caroline's case a brief period of cold resentment, both sisters had settled into cautious support. Amelia, the less complicated of the two, had embraced the situation with genuine enthusiasm. "Just think," she had whispered to Kathleen one night as they prepared for bed. "You'll outrank nearly everyone, even Mother, and you'll have the grandest house and the finest jewels, and everyone will have to curtsy to you." Caroline's acceptance had been more measured, tempered by her greater awareness of social complexities. "You deserve happiness," she had told Kathleen with surprising sincerity. "And if the Duke sees your worth when others have been blind to it, then he is wiser than most men." For Kathleen herself, the courtship had been a daily exercise in managing disbelief. Each morning she woke half expecting to discover that the Duke's interest had been an elaborate dream. Each evening she retired with renewed wonder that another day had passed with his attention unwavering. Yet beyond the public spectacle and social adjustments, something more profound was developing between them. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond general topics to personal histories, beliefs, and aspirations. Edgar spoke of his childhood at Westmoreland Hall, his education at Oxford, his complex relationship with his formidable father. Kathleen shared her love of literature, her quiet observations of society's hypocrisies, her deep attachment to her sisters despite the complications of their relationships. Most surprisingly, they discovered a shared sense of humor, Edgar's dry wit complementing Kathleen's more subtle observations about the absurdities of aristocratic life. The first time she had made him laugh outright, a rich, unexpected sound that transformed his austere features, Kathleen had felt a surge of triumph greater than any social success she had ever achieved. By the 4th week of their courtship, Kathleen found herself in the unprecedented position of attending the Duchess of Richmond's ball, as the acknowledged favourite of the Duke of Westmoreland. The invitation itself had been a triumph. In previous seasons, the Maitland family had not quite merited inclusion in such an exclusive event. "The gown is perfect," the Countess declared, circling Kathleen with critical appraisal on the evening of the ball. "The colour brings out your complexion beautifully." The gown in question, a creation of deep emerald silk with delicate silver embroidery at the modest neckline and hem, was indeed the finest Kathleen had ever owned. Her mother, with newfound enthusiasm for her eldest daughter's appearance, had commissioned it specially from London's most exclusive modiste. "The emeralds will complement it wonderfully," Caroline added from her perch on Kathleen's bed, where she sat already dressed in pale rose silk that emphasized her golden beauty. "Emeralds?" Kathleen questioned, confused. Her mother and sister exchanged meaningful glances. "You haven't seen them yet, have you?" the Countess asked with poorly concealed excitement. "His Grace sent a package for you an hour ago. I assumed you knew." "I knew nothing of any package," Kathleen replied, a flutter of nervous anticipation rising in her chest. The Countess moved to Kathleen's dressing table and retrieved a leather box from the drawer. "Your father thought it best to secure it until you were ready. Here." Kathleen accepted the box with trembling fingers. It was heavy, crafted of fine Morocco leather with a discreet gold clasp. A small card was attached, bearing Edgar's bold handwriting, "For Kathleen, a mere shadow of your own brilliance." With her mother and sister watching eagerly, Kathleen opened the clasp. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lay a parure of emeralds and diamonds, a necklace of exquisite design, matching earrings, and a delicate tiara that caught the light with breathtaking fire. "Heavens!" Caroline breathed, leaning closer. "Those are from the Westmoreland collection. They say the emeralds were brought back from India by the second Duke. They're famous." Kathleen stared at the jewels, momentarily speechless. The gesture represented more than mere adornment. It was a public declaration of Edgar's intentions. Family jewels were not bestowed casually, especially pieces of such historical significance. "Shall I help you put them on?" her mother asked, already reaching for the necklace. Kathleen nodded, still unable to form words. The Countess fastened the emeralds around her neck, their weight substantial, yet somehow not burdensome. The earrings followed, then the tiara, carefully secured among Kathleen's chestnut curls. When she finally turned to the mirror, Kathleen barely recognized the woman who gazed back at her. The jewels transformed her, not merely through their obvious value, but by conferring a presence, an undeniable dignity that transcended conventional beauty. "Oh, Kathleen," Amelia whispered from the doorway where she had appeared unnoticed, "you look like a duchess already." "Not quite yet," the Countess corrected practically, though her expression betrayed unmistakable satisfaction. "But soon, if all goes well tonight." "Tonight?" Kathleen turned from the mirror, sudden understanding dawning. "You believe he will offer for me this evening?" Her mother nodded, adjusting a curl that had escaped the tiara's configuration. "All signs point to it." "The jewels, the timing!" "Exactly 1 month since he approached your father. The Duke is known for his precision in all things." A wave of nervous anticipation swept through Kathleen. 1 month. The time frame Edgar had specified when requesting permission to court her. Had that month truly shown him enough of her character to commit to a lifetime together? Had it shown her enough of his? "You needn't look so terrified," Caroline remarked, rising gracefully from the bed. "Most women would give anything to be in your position." "I'm not terrified," Kathleen protested, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. "Merely contemplative." "Well, contemplate while we finish preparing," the Countess instructed briskly. "The carriage will be ready in 20 minutes, and we mustn't keep the Duke waiting." The Duchess of Richmond's ballroom glittered with hundreds of candles, their light reflected in crystal chandeliers and the jewels adorning London's elite. As the Maitland family entered, Kathleen felt the weight of curious gazes, the rustle of whispers behind fans, the subtle shifting of bodies as people positioned themselves for a better view of the woman who had captured the elusive Duke of Westmoreland's attention. Edgar awaited them near the entrance, a commanding presence in formal evening attire, the stark black and white emphasizing the powerful lines of his body. His eyes found Kathleen immediately, warming with approval as he took in her appearance. "Lady Kathleen," he greeted her, taking her gloved hand and raising it briefly to his lips. "You look magnificent." "Thank you, Your Grace," she replied formally, aware of the avid audience surrounding them. "And thank you for the generous gift. The emeralds are exquisite." "They pale in comparison to the woman wearing them," he said. And though the compliment might have sounded practiced from another man, from Edgar it carried the weight of sincere appreciation. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and carefully navigated social interactions. Edgar remained at Kathleen's side throughout, his presence both protective and possessive as he guided her through the intricate hierarchy of the ton. She met duchesses who assessed her with calculating eyes, earls who bowed with newfound respect, ambitious mamas who had once dismissed her as irrelevant. Through it all, Kathleen maintained the quiet dignity that had first drawn Edgar's attention, neither flaunting her elevated status, nor shrinking from the scrutiny it invited. If these people were to be her future peers, they would need to accept her as she was. Not a conventional beauty, perhaps, but a woman of substance and character. "You are handling this remarkably well," Edgar murmured during a brief moment of relative privacy near one of the ballroom's massive flower arrangements. Many would be overwhelmed by such intense observation. Kathleen smiled slightly. "I've had years of practice being invisible in these same rooms, Edgar. There is a certain freedom in finally being seen." His gaze sharpened with interest. Freedom. Most would consider it a burden, being the center of such attention. "It is both," she acknowledged. "But at least now the speculation has substance. Before I was dismissed without consideration. Now, even those who doubt my worthiness must acknowledge my presence." Edgar studied her face with the intensity she had come to both anticipate and value. "You continue to surprise me, Kathleen. Most women in your position would either shrink from the scrutiny or revel in it without nuance." "I am not most women," she reminded him, echoing words he had spoken to her in the garden weeks earlier. "No," he agreed softly. "You are not, and I thank Providence daily for that fact." He glanced toward the terrace doors. "Would you walk with me for a moment? I find I need respite from the crush." Though Kathleen recognized the significance of such a request, a private conversation at a public ball could have only one interpretation. She nodded calmly. "Of course." Edgar offered his arm, guiding her toward the terrace doors with deliberate purpose. They had almost reached their destination when a strident voice interrupted their progress. "Your Grace, how delightful to see you again after so long." Kathleen felt Edgar tense beside her before he turned to acknowledge the speaker, a striking woman in her early 30s, dressed in a gown of bold crimson that emphasized her considerable physical assets. Her beauty was of the mature, knowing variety that made Kathleen feel suddenly young and inexperienced by comparison. "Lady Hargrove," Edgar acknowledged with a formal bow that conveyed respect without warmth. "It has been some time. 2 years, 3 months, and approximately 12 days, the woman replied with a smile that held secret knowledge. "Not that I've been counting, of course." "Of course," Edgar agreed dryly. "May I present Lady Kathleen Maitland? Kathleen, this is Lady Hargrove, the Viscountess Hargrove." "Lady Kathleen." The Viscountess's assessment was swift and comprehensive, her smile never wavering, though her eyes conveyed less friendly emotions. "How charming to meet you at last. You're quite the talk of London, you know." "So I've gathered," Kathleen replied evenly. "Though I can't imagine why. Surely London has more interesting topics for discussion." Lady Hargrove laughed, the sound practiced in its musicality. "Modesty, how refreshing, though perhaps unnecessary when one is wearing the Westmoreland emeralds." The pointed reference to the jewels and their implicit significance hung in the air between them. Kathleen sensed rather than saw Edgar's increased tension. "The emeralds are merely on loan for the evening," she said calmly, though this was not strictly true based on Edgar's note. "His Grace has been most generous." "Indeed," Lady Hargrove agreed, her gaze shifting to Edgar. "The Duke's generosity is well known to many." The insinuation was unmistakable, and Kathleen felt a flicker of uncertainty. Had Edgar generously bestowed gifts on other women before her? Was Lady Hargrove implying a prior relationship? Before she could pursue this unsettling line of thought, Edgar spoke with barely concealed impatience. "If you'll excuse us, Lady Hargrove, Lady Kathleen and I were just stepping out for some air." "Of course," the Viscountess replied smoothly. Don't let me detain you, though, Your Grace. I do hope we might find a moment to reminisce about old times before the evening concludes. I have so many fond memories." With a final calculating smile at Kathleen, she glided away, the crimson silk of her gown drawing admiring glances from gentlemen throughout the ballroom. Edgar's jaw was tight as he resumed their progress toward the terrace. "I apologize for that encounter. Lady Hargrove enjoys creating discomfort where none need exist." "She seems to know you well," Kathleen observed, unable to entirely suppress her curiosity. "We moved in similar circles before my departure for the continent," he replied carefully, as they stepped into the cooler air of the terrace. "She harbored certain expectations that I never encouraged." Kathleen absorbed this information, recognizing the delicacy with which Edgar was navigating the subject. Lady Hargrove was precisely the type of sophisticated, beautiful woman one would expect to capture a duke's attention. Had there been more between them than Edgar was acknowledging? "I see," she said simply, deciding that pressing for details would be both undignified and ultimately irrelevant to their current situation. Edgar led her to a quiet corner of the terrace, partially secluded by potted palms, but still visible enough to maintain propriety. The gardens beyond stretched into darkness, while behind them the ballroom glowed with warmth and music. The moment felt suspended between two worlds, the public sphere of society and the private realm of personal connection. "Kathleen," Edgar's voice had softened, losing the edge of irritation that Lady Hargrove's interruption had provoked. "1 month ago today, I asked your father's permission to court you formally." "Yes," she acknowledged, her heart beginning to race despite her outward composure. "A month of quite unexpected developments." "For us both," he agreed. "Though I entered this courtship with clear purpose, I could not have anticipated how thoroughly you would exceed even my highest expectations." Kathleen felt warmth rise to her cheeks at the sincere admiration in his voice. "I have found our time together equally illuminating, Edgar." "Have you?" His gaze searched hers intently. "And what have you discovered in this illumination?" It was a genuine question, she realized, not merely a rhetorical step toward his own declaration, but a true inquiry into her thoughts and feelings. This, perhaps more than anything, exemplified what she had come to value most about Edgar: his consistent treatment of her as an intellectual equal, a partner whose opinions merited serious consideration. "I have discovered a man of principle and conviction," she replied thoughtfully. "A man whose outward reserve conceals depth of feeling rather than absence of it. A man who sees beyond societal expectations to recognize individual worth." She paused, gathering courage for her most personal observation. "A man I have grown to care for deeply, in ways I had not thought possible a month ago." Something in Edgar's expression shifted, a softening around the eyes, a relaxing of the habitual control he maintained over his features. "And I have discovered a woman of exceptional character, intelligent without pretension, strong without harshness, beautiful in ways that transcend conventional definitions." He took her hands in his, the contact sending awareness racing through her even through the barrier of their gloves. "1 month ago I sought a suitable duchess, a partner who could share the responsibilities of my position with dignity and purpose. What I have found, Kathleen, is something far more precious, a woman with whom I wish to share not merely my title and estates, but my thoughts, my aspirations, my life." The words, spoken with such quiet intensity, resonated through Kathleen like a physical touch. This was no practiced proposal, no calculated alliance, but a genuine expression of developing attachment. "Kathleen Maitland," Edgar continued, his voice deepening with emotion, "I find myself in the unexpected position of offering not merely my name and title, but my heart, such as it is, long guarded and imperfectly formed. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you be my duchess, my partner, my closest companion in all matters great and small?" Though she had anticipated this moment throughout the evening, indeed, throughout the past week, the reality of it still left Kathleen momentarily speechless. The man before her, powerful, wealthy, admired and feared in equal measure, was offering her everything society had long since decided she would never possess: position, security, respect. But more than these material considerations, he was offering himself, his carefully guarded heart, his private thoughts, his true companionship. And in that offering, Kathleen recognized the rarest gift of all, the chance to be truly known and valued for herself, not merely for what she represented. "Yes," she said, the simple syllable carrying the weight of transformation. "Yes, Edgar, I will be your wife." His hands tightened around hers, and for a moment she thought he might break convention entirely and kiss her there on the terrace, in full view of anyone who cared to observe. Instead, he brought her fingers to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with such focused intensity that the gesture felt more intimate than any more dramatic action could have been. "You have made me the happiest of men," he said, his voice slightly rough with emotion. "And I swear to you, Kathleen, you will never regret this decision. I will spend my life ensuring your happiness as you have ensured mine tonight." The promise, spoken with such conviction, brought unexpected tears to Kathleen's eyes. "I believe you," she whispered. "As improbable as all this seems, I do believe you." Edgar smiled, that rare, transformative smile that altered his entire countenance from austerity to genuine warmth. "Then let us return to the ballroom and make our announcement. I want all of London to witness my good fortune." As they turned to re-enter the ballroom, Kathleen caught sight of Lady Hargrove, watching them from just inside the doors, her expression a complex mixture of calculation and thwarted ambition. In that moment, Kathleen understood that her journey as the future Duchess of Westmoreland would not be without challenges. There would be those who questioned her worthiness, who resented her elevation, who would seek to undermine her position through rumor and innuendo. But with Edgar beside her, his hand steady and supportive at her back, Kathleen felt equal to these challenges. The woman who had spent years being overlooked had found not only visibility but genuine partnership, a foundation from which she could face whatever society might whisper behind its collective fan. 3 months later, on a perfect summer morning, Kathleen Maitland became the Duchess of Westmoreland in a ceremony that united London's highest aristocracy with political leaders, foreign diplomats, and the cream of intellectual society. The guest list reflected Edgar's position, but also, more surprisingly to some observers, Kathleen's developing influence on her future husband's social circle. Alongside the expected duchesses and earls sat poets, scientists, and even the occasional political radical, all invited at Kathleen's suggestion and approved by Edgar with thoughtful consideration rather than automatic deference to convention. "Your Grace," the Archbishop of Canterbury pronounced at the conclusion of the ceremony, bowing to Edgar before turning to Kathleen with equal respect. "Your Grace." The title bestowed upon her for the first time sent a shiver of realization through Kathleen. No longer the forgotten daughter, the overlooked spinster, the plain sister. She was now a duchess, one of the highest-ranking women in England, second only to royalty. As they processed back down the aisle of St. George's Chapel, Edgar leaned slightly closer to murmur in her ear. "How does it feel, Duchess?" Kathleen met his gaze, finding in it the same genuine interest in her thoughts that had first drawn them together. "Surreal," she admitted with the honesty he valued. And yet, somehow, right. His smile, visible only to her in that intimate moment, warmed her more than the June sunshine that greeted them as they emerged onto the chapel steps. "Right indeed," he agreed softly, "as if all paths have led to this moment." The wedding breakfast at Westmoreland House, the Duke's London residence, soon to be Kathleen's primary home, was a lavish affair that nonetheless bore the distinctive touches of the new Duchess's influence. Alongside traditional delicacies were simpler offerings that reflected Kathleen's personal tastes. The musical selections included not only the expected classical pieces, but also folk melodies that Edgar had discovered she loved during their courtship. Caroline and Amelia, resplendent as bridesmaids in pale gold silk, moved through the reception with the social grace that had always come naturally to them. Yet even in their beauty and charm, they no longer overshadowed their elder sister. Kathleen, in her wedding gown of ivory satin with the Westmoreland emeralds at her throat, commanded attention not merely through her new rank, but through the quiet confidence that had blossomed during her unexpected courtship. "Who would have imagined it?" the Countess of Sherborne murmured to her husband as they observed their eldest daughter accepting congratulations from a royal duke. "Our Kathleen, outranking us all." "I always knew there was more to her than met the eye," the Earl replied with revisionist pride. "Takes after my mother, you know." "Same quiet strength." The Countess refrained from reminding him that he had never before drawn this particular comparison. "She looks happy," she observed instead. Truly happy. And indeed, beneath the formal dignity required of her new position, Kathleen radiated a contentment that transcended mere social triumph. Throughout the reception, her gaze frequently sought and found Edgar's across the crowded rooms, each shared glance reinforcing the connection that had developed between them. A connection based not on conventional romance, but on mutual respect, intellectual compatibility, and growing affection. As the celebration continued, Kathleen found a moment of relative privacy in a small antechamber adjoining the main reception rooms. She had stepped away briefly to adjust her train, which had been slightly damaged by an over-eager well-wisher's careless foot. "Hiding from your admirers already, Your Grace?" Kathleen turned to find Lord Hathaway in the doorway, his expression warm with genuine affection. "Edward, I was hoping to speak with you before you departed." He entered the room maintaining a proper distance that acknowledged her new status, while honoring their long-standing friendship. "I wanted to offer my personal congratulations. You make a radiant duchess, Kathleen." "Thank you." She studied his face, searching for any sign of the regret her mother had hinted might exist. "Are you truly happy for me, Edward?" His smile reached his kind eyes, dispelling her concerns. "Completely and without reservation. You have found a partnership of equals, which is all I ever wished for you. Even if that partnership is not with you," she asked softly, acknowledging for the first time the possibility that had always lingered unspoken between them. Edward shook his head gently. "We would not have suited, Kathleen, though I cherish your friendship more than I can express. The Duke challenges you in ways I never could. He sees your strength where I might have coddled your gentle nature. You need that challenge to become your fullest self." The insight, so perceptive, so free of self-pity, confirmed what Kathleen had always known about Edward. His goodness ran bone-deep, uncomplicated by the darker shadings of ambition or envy. "You deserve happiness too," she told him earnestly. "Promise me you'll remain open to finding it." "I promise," he agreed with a slight bow. "Though I may take a page from your book and look beyond the obvious candidates. There's something to be said for discovering value where others have failed to search." Before Kathleen could respond, another voice joined their conversation, deeper, with an edge of carefully controlled possession. "Lord Hathaway, I hope you're enjoying the celebration." Edgar stood in the doorway, his posture relaxed yet somehow conveying unmistakable authority. Kathleen had learned to read the subtle signs of his moods during their courtship. The slight tension at the corners of his mouth suggested uncertainty rather than anger. "Indeed, Your Grace," Edward replied smoothly, stepping back with respectful deference. "I was just offering the Duchess my congratulations. You are a fortunate man." "I am well aware," Edgar agreed, moving to stand beside Kathleen with natural possessiveness that stopped short of being overbearing. "And grateful for those who recognized her worth, before I had the wisdom to discover it myself." The acknowledgement, so unlike the jealous response a lesser man might have exhibited, earned Edgar an appreciative glance from his new wife. Edward noted the exchange with evident approval. "I shall rejoin the celebration and leave you two in peace," he said, bowing first to Kathleen, then to Edgar. "May your partnership bring you both joy beyond measure." When he had departed, Edgar turned to Kathleen with a raised eyebrow. "Should I be concerned about Lord Hathaway's devotion?" The question held no real worry, only genuine curiosity. Kathleen smiled, adjusting the emerald tiara that now rested with familiar weight upon her chestnut curls. "Edward is an old friend who wished me well and wisely recognized that our friendship would never have developed into a suitable marriage. Nothing more." Edgar nodded, accepting her assessment without further question. "I've received word that our carriage is prepared whenever you wish to depart. The journey to Westmoreland Hall is long, and I thought you might prefer to leave before exhaustion sets in." Westmoreland Hall, Edgar's ancestral seat in Derbyshire, where they would spend the first month of their marriage before embarking on a tour of the continent. Kathleen had yet to see the estate that would now be her primary responsibility, though Edgar had described it in detail during their courtship. The extensive gardens, the library with its collections spanning centuries, the gallery of family portraits to which hers would soon be added. "I am ready," she told him, discovering the truth of it as she spoke. Ready not merely to depart the reception, but to begin this new chapter of her life. A life transformed beyond recognition in the space of a few short months. Edgar offered his arm, his expression softening into the private warmth he reserved for her alone. Then let us bid our guests farewell, Duchess, and begin our journey home. Home. The word held new meaning, infused with possibilities that Kathleen had long since stopped allowing herself to imagine. As they moved together back toward the reception rooms, she felt the weight of the Westmoreland emeralds against her skin, no longer foreign or intimidating, but simply a part of her new identity. An identity that had expanded rather than replaced who she had always been. The guests lined the entrance hall to bid them farewell, faces familiar and unfamiliar, blurring together in a kaleidoscope of good wishes and curious assessment. Kathleen saw her sisters, genuinely happy for her despite the social complications her elevation created for them. Her parents, the Countess already adapting her manner to acknowledge her daughter's superior rank. Lady Hargrove, her smile fixed and brittle as she curtsied with technical correctness and barely concealed resentment. And finally, as they reached the massive oak doors that opened onto the summer sunshine, Kathleen caught sight of an elderly woman watching her with shrewd appraisal, Lady Augusta Wallis, Edgar's formidable aunt, who had travelled from her home in Bath specifically for the wedding. As Edgar paused to speak briefly with his secretary, Lady Augusta approached Kathleen directly. "Well, Duchess," she said without preamble, her voice low enough to remain private. "You have accomplished what many considered impossible, capturing the interest and, more impressively, the affection of my stubborn nephew." "I assure you, Lady Augusta, it was never my intention to capture anything," Kathleen replied with equal directness. "The Duke's attention came as a complete surprise to me." The older woman's eyes twinkled with unexpected humor. "Precisely why you succeeded where so many failed. Edgar has always been suspicious of obvious pursuit." She leaned slightly closer. "A word of advice, if I may be so bold. He values honesty above all things, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Never manage him with feminine tactics, no matter how tempting. Direct confrontation will earn his respect far more than subtle manipulation." Before Kathleen could respond to this unexpected counsel, Edgar returned to her side. "Aunt Augusta," he acknowledged, with genuine warmth. "Giving the new Duchess advice already?" "Merely offering congratulations," his aunt replied innocently, "and observing that you've chosen more wisely than I dared hope. She has steel beneath that quiet exterior, this one. You'll need it." Edgar smiled, that rare, transformative smile that Kathleen had come to treasure. "I'm counting on it, Aunt. The Westmoreland title needs fresh perspective as much as it needs continuation." Lady Augusta nodded approvingly. "Well said, nephew. Now off with you both. The future awaits, and it's impolite to keep it waiting." With final farewells to their guests, Edgar handed Kathleen into the ducal carriage, its polished panels emblazoned with the Westmoreland crest, a crest that now represented her as much as it did the long line of dukes who had preceded her husband. As the carriage pulled away from Westmoreland House, Kathleen gazed back at the assembled well-wishers, struck by the improbability of her journey. 4 months ago, she had stood forgotten at a ball, resigned to spinsterhood and social invisibility. Now she departed as a duchess, her future filled with possibilities she had never dared contemplate. "Second thoughts?" Edgar asked quietly, noting her reflective expression. Kathleen turned to him. This man who had seen value where others had perceived only plainness, who had offered partnership where most would have expected mere grateful acceptance. "Not about us," she assured him, reaching for his hand with newfound confidence. "I was merely marveling at how thoroughly life can change when one is truly seen." Edgar's fingers interlaced with hers, strong and steady. "I expect we have only begun to discover what we might see in each other, Duchess." And as the carriage carried them away from London toward their shared future, Kathleen Maitland Wallis, Duchess of Westmoreland, smiled at the thought of all that remained to be discovered, about her husband, about herself, about the life they would build together. A life that had begun with 7 simple, transformative words spoken across a crowded ballroom. "I came for you, not them." The end. Dear listener, rejection can wound deeply, I know. Sometimes it feels as if the world has grown too cold, as if no one truly sees the kind and gentle soul that you are. But the truth is, love has not vanished. It has simply changed its shape. Today, it reveals itself in the little things, in a ray of sunlight warming your skin, in a smile shared on the street, in a sweet memory that suddenly softens your heart, in the loving eyes of your pet who greets you with joy, in the laughter of your grandchildren and nieces and nephews that fills the room with life, and, who knows, perhaps somewhere around a quiet corner, a new love might appear just to dance with you for a while. You are not forgotten, nor are you invisible. Life still reaches out to you quietly but surely. There is a greater kind of love, one that asks for nothing, that simply is constant, tender and calm, wrapping around you even now like a soft blanket of peace. So take a deep breath. Feel that gentle presence surrounding you. May the night cradle you with serenity. May sleep come softly, and may tomorrow find you stronger, reminded that your worth is vast, unshakable, and forever. With warmth and gratitude, the legends of the Fall team. Thank you, dear listener, for staying with us until the end. Your presence, your time, and your kind words in the comments are what give meaning to every story we tell. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It helps our channel grow, and it truly keeps our hearts motivated to continue creating more stories of love, healing, and hope. And remember, at the end of this video, another story awaits you. Click and be surprised by more emotional tales like this one. Thank you for being part of our family, the Legends of the Fall team.